What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Emmy Nixon. Today is December 29th, and oh my goodness, the camera. Excuse me, y'all. Don't mind. Okay, it's a great start. And joining me from Austin, Texas, Michael Ween. What's up? The Stat King himself, Michael Ween.
Well, what is up, everybody? Hope everyone had a fantastic holiday week, I guess you could call it. Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you may celebrate. Hope all of you are still staying safe, staying healthy, enjoying time with your friends and family. A quick announcement before we get started here with, I believe it's episode 86. Where we'll be talking about, we're going to jump back into our NFL picks. We've taken a couple weeks off. And then, of course, we're about actually less than 48 hours away from kickoff of the college football playoffs. So we'll be dissecting both matchups at the very end of this podcast. And we'll be also reminiscing on some of the great sports moments of 2021 and also paying quick tributes to some of the great sports icons that have passed during this past year. But quick announcement before we get to all of that. I guess it was the day before Christmas Eve where I started feeling a little under the weather. And I had, fever, I had cough. I still have a cough, and I'll get to that in a minute. I've been a little congested, just, general symptoms. Haven't gotten tested for COVID. My dad didn't want me to. Been in isolation ever since. Just spending time with family. My family hasn't, I guess, contracted what I have, or at least haven't shown, any symptoms. I don't know if it's Omicron. I don't know if it's just a sinus infection, a cold, whatever it is. Please just bear with me during the course of this podcast. If I sound a little funny or if I cough here and now, I'm going to try to mute myself because it's not the prettiest of coughs. And you guys probably don't want to hear that the entire episode. So while Emmy's talking, if I have to cough, I'm going to try to mute myself on the Zoom so y'all don't have to hear that. But if I'm talking and I let out a little cough, just bear with me. But other than that, I'm doing well. I've been watching a lot of football. It's bowl season. And over Christmas, had a great time. Watched some basketball as well. We know we're going to have more basketball content coming soon after the New Year's. But this will likely be our last podcast, or it will be our last podcast of 2021. So we're going to start the episode by reminiscing on the year that was 2021 in sports. So do you want to start with the good or the bad?
Let's start with the good. But
Okay.
before we get into it, I just want to say, if my camera shifts again, if my mic falls off the desk, bear with me as well, because I'm still trying to figure out my setup for the podcast at this new place, So once I figure that out, we'll be good. But for now, just bear with me. But yeah, let's start with the good.
Okay, so top 3 or 5 sports moments of the year. I only did 3. Short on prep time. That's all I had time for. But you're more than welcome to start us off here with your top 3 or 5, whatever you want to do. Sports moments, games, whatever you want to, happenings, whatever you want to call them, occurrences of the year 2021. Why don't you start us off?
Well, my number 4 on the list would probably be the Game 7 between the Brooklyn Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks. That game, it had absolutely everything, didn't it? All-time performance all-time performances on both sides, Hall of Famers on both sides, dueling. Kevin Durant dropping almost 50 points, and late game theatrics. That was the game where Kevin Durant, in the final moments of the game, had his foot on the line for a buzzer beater that would have ended the series. Well, not a buzzer beater, but a go-ahead game winner, pretty much. That would have ended the series right then and there. But instead went to overtime. The Bucks pulled it out. And the rest is history.
Go ahead and take us through your entire list.
Okay. Okay. My number 3 was the Russell Westbrook trade. I, at the time, was a little bit disconnected from the NBA. I was kind of starting to look into, NFL training camp, and I was watching Cowboys Hard Knocks, and then boom, I get this Woj bomb on my phone that the Lakers had traded for Russell Westbrook, and I was just like, wow. If you told me that we would see Westbrook on a team with LeBron in even just 3 years ago, I would have just scoffed at you. But here we are. That was just a moment that was just it shows how crazy the NBA can get. I mean, it's really turning into in some cases, it's just scenarios that you would only see in a 2K game, it feels like.
Right.
And that's just how cool the NBA is now. I mean, for good and for bad.
Right.
It is what it is now. And it's a fun reality to have with all this player movement. And so moving on, my number 2 on the list was the NBA Finals as a whole. I just thought that series was incredible. For me as a basketball fan, and where I was at the time, I was working at Can't Win a Do, and that was at the time when we weren't doing our podcast, and I was really busy. But when I was able to have the off nights and watch all the games, I mean, that entire series, it was incredible. I mean, the shifts in momentum, just the all-time performances. I mean, people are probably going to forget that Devin Booker was incredible the first 2 games of that series, and even in game 3 as well. But then Giannis took over and, in my opinion, cemented his legacy as one of the best. And that was just such a cool moment to see. And I honestly thought about putting it at number 1, but number 1 is going to be a little bit surprising because we had never talked about this sport before on the podcast. But number 1 is the finale race of F1 from this year. I believe it was the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. So 23 race season all culminated into a perfect just mano final lap. That was just incredible. And the way the race turned out, it was controversial. I mean, the fact that Lewis was up 12 seconds in that race, and then the safety car came out, and then the safety car wasn't able to leave the track to resume racing until the very final lap of the race. And by that point, Verstappen and Lewis were neck and neck. But I still think it was an ending that was worthy of the racing that we had seen the entire season. It was the ending that we deserved, just with the final lap duel being where we saw the amazing overtake by Max about halfway through the lap, and then Lewis fighting back, going wheel to wheel. it was just incredible. And that was, I mean, if you look into the odds of that happening in a F1 season, it's incredibly low. The fact that it came down to the final lap, and that's something that may never happen again. So that's why I had to put it number one.
Okay, fair enough. Good list. I applaud you for being unique. I, looked at this list in a very similar manner, although I have some different twists, some the same, some different. Most of them, I only did 3. It was a really good sports year, but I think we've seen better. I think you'd probably agree. And hopefully 2022 will bring us much more. But that's a story for a different day. At number 3 on my list, we'll start it off. I just really enjoyed, and we already talked about this on the past podcast, I really enjoyed watching the Atlanta Braves win the World Series. What that city as a whole, and we already talked about this on our World Series recap episode, but what that city as a whole had been through, just leading up to that moment, and it was a tough season for the Braves. Unremarkable 2021 season. They sat at or below 500 all the way into early August, which is just incredible. Ended up going on a run. They lost their best player in Ronald Acuna Jr. Right before the All-Star break. Everything seemed to go up in flames, but they were able to get it together, made some moves at the trade deadline, made a run, and anything can happen in the playoffs. And they were able to beat the Houston Astros in 6 games and win their first World Series in 25 years, or actually 26 years to be exact. I just found that to be just a really nice sports story. Something, you don't see every day. 88 win team winning the World Series. It's just not something you think about, but good for the Atlanta Braves and good for the city of Atlanta. At number 2 on my list, similar to yours, except I picked out a specific moment, was watching Giannis Antetokounmpo, virtuoso, 50-point, Game 6 NBA Finals series clinching performance. Man, there were many great performances in that series, and I think that's what made it such a great series. 2 great teams, but also the individual performances that we got to witness. Devin Booker's 40-point performances on back-to-back games, like you mentioned. And then Giannis, what he did in games 4, 5, and 6 consecutively might have been the greatest stretch of games I've ever seen a human play basketball. I mean, seriously. But the 50-point Game 6 NBA Finals clinching performance really cemented his legacy. It was just an all-around virtuoso performance. And he had the moments, too, to go with it. He had the block. He had the alley-oop. Both of those moments were really, when I think about the NBA nowadays, just like with LeBron all those years ago, the chase down. And, these are the moments that you think of when you think of the NBA and the NBA Finals, the biggest stage. You think of those moments, Kyrie Irving with that shot. These are the moments that we think of. And that's one of them that will stick in my brain for many years to come. So Giannis, specifically, that entire series was great. But the 50-point Game 6 NBA Finals clinching performance was something to behold. And then my favorite sports moment, being the lover of college basketball and March Madness that I am, was the Final Four game between UCLA and Gonzaga. Truly one of the best college basketball games I think I ever watched, possibly the best. And then the moment, of course, came at the very end where Jalen Suggs hit the shot, went on to become a top 5 pick in this past year's NBA draft by the Orlando Magic, I believe, at number 4. Not actually sure how he is doing, but that's a story for another day. But that was just one of the greatest games. My eyes were glued to the TV from start to finish. Johnny Juzang and that great Gonzaga team going at it. And frankly, I think that took a lot out of Gonzaga. And I think we saw that in the national championship because we knew they were a great team, but they came out in the national championship against Baylor and they had nothing left. And I think that showed. And Baylor had a little bit easier of a time with dealing with Houston, the other semifinals. But that was truly, I mean, if we were to rank games of the year, I think that might be my number one because that was just, some people don't like to watch college basketball until March Madness, and I get that. It's for a good reason because March Madness gives you the excitement and the potential for upsets and the underdog and all these storylines and all that. But that was as good as a basketball game as I watched this year. And I don't care what anyone says. So those were my top three favorite sports moments of 2021. There were many others that were probably not included on this list. Tom Brady joining a new team and winning the Super Bowl is something not to, but we've gotten so used to that we're sort of numb to it at this point. And there were many others. The Olympics happened this year. Simone Biles overcoming some of the challenges. If I had, expanded my list to top 5, maybe would have made the list. But so many others. But hopefully, as good as this year was in sports, 2022 will be even better. So I think this will be a yearly tradition now on the podcast. I think we did it a couple of years ago, but maybe we skipped last year because it was, COVID and all that, and we didn't really get a ton of great sporting moments. But from here on out, I think every December at this time, we should reminisce on what happened that calendar year in the sports world. But anyways, from the good, we have to talk about some of the not so good. We're going to honor, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, 6 or 7 names that icons, you could call them, that unfortunately passed away this past calendar year, 2021. So I've been talking a lot, as I probably shouldn't be. So Emmy, I'll let you take the first one that we have. 6 names that we have. I have 3. He has 3. So I'll let him start it off by paying tribute.
Yeah, I'm gonna start it off with Damaris Thomas, and the craziest thing about that entire situation was it really just like a lot of these they really just came out of nowhere, and with his especially, he was a guy who obviously had a lot of great moments on the field. Obviously, those years with Peyton Manning were incredible. That playoff game against the Steelers with Tim Tebow, that walk-off touchdown, that was, I mean, can't get any better than that. That's a moment that every kid dreams about. Anybody who becomes a football player dreams about scoring a game-winning touchdown in the playoffs. And I just, as I was trying to look into what to say, I looked into a little bit of his story. And so as a kid, basically, he knew that his mom and grandmother, who he lived with at the time, were in like the drug business, and he would have nightmares that one day they would all just they would be taken away by the police. And then one day that day came, and then he had to grow up at 10 or 11 years old He would wake up before school and work on in the fields, like with crops and just trying to make money before school at 12 years old. And to go from that story to NFL legend in just 20 years time is just incredible. Yeah, it's the fact that he can't, share what he learned from that journey himself anymore. Obviously, other people can talk about his journey, but his perspective, the fact that that can't be shared anymore, that's what makes it hurt even more. So, yeah,
Right. He
Westbrook is
actually
hilarious. Yeah.
he was less than 2 years removed from being retired from the game because he was last seen on a football field. He actually finished his career with the Jets in 2019. So he was that's the terrible part is he wasn't even into like the next part of his life yet. And unfortunately something happened. I think I've seen reports that he had problems with seizures and potentially had a seizure in the shower or something like that. I don't know if that's true or if that's been confirmed, but those were the rumors that I've seen. I don't want to misreport anything with this sort of stuff. But rest in peace. He was one of the greats of this decade, the 2010s. Certainly would rank top 5 in my book for what he did on a consistent basis year in year out with the Denver Broncos. Was a true leader on that team, and of course what he ended up doing to my Steelers in that AFC wildcard game back in 2012. So truly one of the greats of this decade. Should be remembered for that. I think he was a 4-time Pro Bowler and ended up, of course, winning a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning. So good for him. It's sad that he's gone, but unfortunately, things like that happen. So we'll move on. I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning of this year, January 22nd. Some know him as Henry Aaron, others know him as Hank Aaron. Sports icon. He was one of those. Baseball player, ranks on the Mount Rushmore of baseball players for many baseball historians, baseball lovers everywhere, even non-baseball lovers. He ranks as one of the great athletes and great people of, in sports of all time. He was everything an athlete and a human being should be: charismatic, fun, loving, hardworking, everything you think of. You name it. Hank Aaron was it. Boxing legend Muhammad Ali once said, "Hank Aaron is the only man I idolize more than myself." So that's some high praise from another legend in Muhammad Ali. On the field in 23 seasons, Hank Aaron, actually 25 seasons, Hank Aaron was a consistent producer at the plate and in the outfield, only winning one World Series and one National League MVP, but it goes a lot further than that. He batted 300 14 times. He hit 30 home runs 15 times, hit 90 RBI 16 times, and appeared in an all-star game every single one of his 25 seasons. 25-time MLB all-star. And on April 8th, 1974, he passed Babe Ruth's home run record of 714, ended up finishing his career with 755, which I believe now ranks second behind one Barry Bonds. And if you took all 755 of his home runs away, he would still have over 3,000 hits for his career. So Truly one of the greats on and off the field. Loved in the baseball industry. The greatest Brave of all time. I'm sure he was proud looking down on this year's Braves team and what they were able to accomplish. One of the greats all time in baseball, but all time in sports, in my opinion, for what he was able to accomplish over the course of his career. Hank Aaron. There you
Yeah. Yeah. This is a tough segment. Oh my gosh.
go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he was an icon beyond the game. I'm not even a baseball fan. I know the name Hank Aaron, and I feel like anybody who's even remotely remotely knowing of the game of baseball knows the name Hank Aaron. So his name will live on through generations. Okay. The next name was part of the Lakers era with Jerry West and all those guys. Will Chamberlain, Elgin Baylor. I mean, he was a guy who, I mean, I can go ahead. I could list a ton of stats, but I mean, everybody knows how good of a talent Elgin Baylor was. I mean, he wasn't the person who could jump the highest, but he could always get his shot off no matter where he was on the court. He was able to put spin on the ball in different angles, hang in the air. He was just extremely crafty. One of the best shooters of his era. That quote is actually from Jerry West. Jerry West said he was one of the best shooters the game ever saw. I'm gonna be completely honest. I only know him through what my dad has told me. My dad, he idolized Magic Johnson a little, as a kid when he was playing basketball. So he knew of that era of Lakers basketball with Elgin Baylor. A lot more, surely a lot more than I do. I really don't know much, but one thing is for sure, he is a legend of the game, no doubt about it.
For sure. Elgin Baylor, inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame in 1997 or 1977. 10-time NBA All-First Team, 11-time NBA All-Star, the Rookie of the Year in '59, a #1 overall draft pick that year as well. You said it, great shooter, just a great basketball player in general, largely considered to be one of the top 50, top 30 basketball players of all time by many, as part of the NBA's 50th anniversary team. And, just this past couple months was named to the NBA's 75th anniversary team. So considered by large amounts in the basketball industry to be one of the greatest to ever do it. But for me, it was really what he was able to do after becoming a general manager of the Los Angeles Clippers for 22 seasons, and being able to do what he was able to accomplish there, winning NBA Executive of the Year in 2006. Just doing it, player, executive, really just one of the great basketball minds and basketball players ever to live. So rest in peace, Elgin Baylor. He was, how old is he? 86, died March 22nd of this past year. Okay, we're gonna take our focus from the NBA to the ranks of college football, where this past August, right before college football season started, the coaching ranks lost a great one in Coach Bobby Bowden, who many of you who don't really study the history of the game may not know. He was one of the great all-time coaches, largely considered to be a top 5, top 3 college football coach of all time. He was the guy that in the 1970s, late 1970s, when he took over in Tallahassee at Florida State, he was the guy that brought that program to be what it was when we saw Jameis Winston win a national championship back in the early 2010s, and when they were dominant back earlier in this decade, early on in the 2010s. He was the guy that brought this program to prominence. Of course, it's now, going through some hard times, but Bobby Bowden was truly one of the greats all time, one of the college football's legendary coaches. Started his career briefly at West Virginia before taking over at Florida State, where he coached for 34 years. The second winningest coach of any collegiate coach in the history of the game. 2 national championships in 1993 and 1999, and coached great players, the likes of Derek Brooks, Deion Sanders, those guys that you think of when you think of those great Florida State teams. He was the guy that was at the helm for all of that. So Bobby Bowden, one of the great college football coaches to ever live, died August 8th, 2021. Rest in peace.
Yeah. I did not hear about his passing earlier this year when it happened. So yeah, it's I don't even know what words are right to say sometimes when talking about loss and things like that. It's such a touchy subject because you're talking about someone's family member, someone's brother, son, whatever the case may be. So you always have to be careful with what you say. So it's always, I don't know. Yeah, it's just really tough. But yeah, last one, Terrence Clark. He was guard for the Kentucky Wildcats this past year, declared for the NBA draft. But before that, he was highly recruited out of high school, went to River School in Western Massachusetts, then moved over to Brewster Academy to focus more on hoops. That's in New Hampshire. And then from there was recruited and chose University of Kentucky, played a season there, then declared for the draft. And it was the summer when he got into a car accident. It was about at 2 a.m. in San Francisco. I'm not going to get into any of those details, but yeah, it was when I was researching for this, it was not a fun read. I encourage you all to look him up, look up his story. But I'm gonna be entirely honest. I don't really know what to say because I read that basically he had ran a red light and then he collided with someone else who was making a left turn, and then boom, it was over. Like, it's just, I kind of thought about myself in that moment, like, wow, like all it takes is one mistake, so.
Yeah, he was something to behold. If you are a big follower of not just, I wouldn't consider myself a big follower of high school basketball, but I do consider myself a big follower of recruiting, both football and college basketball. And he was one of the most talked about on social media, on recruiting sites, on national sites like ESPN, even draft boards. They had him going. Some had him going in the late first round. He was just that talented, and unfortunately, all it took was one, like you said. So, and to me, I mean, all of these are, of course, tragic, and we're not actually in the media. We would like to be, but we're not actually in the media. We don't know these people, like actually know them. So it's really tough to come on here. All we can do is just say what we read and what we learn about these players through articles and features and YouTube and documentaries. So that's all we're really doing, just paying our respects for what we know. But back to the point, all of these are tragic in a way for us. When you just think about it in terms of if it was us in this situation, we'd hate to be in this situation, if it was a family member or a loved one or something like that, but also, or a friend even. But, even though we don't even know them, it's still tragic for all these. But I think Clark, since he was only 19 and was yet to even get started on life, really, when you think about it, might be the most tragic of all of them. And I don't want to, have that as some blanket statement or something, that comes off as rude, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, the dude was younger than us. I mean, think about that. That's
So, and it could happen to any of us. So just be careful. Think about, the consequences of every action. And I know it's hard sometimes, and who knows, but just rest in peace. I know a lot of the other great high school basketball players and a lot of the guys that were drafted this year are doing great things to honor Terrence Clark, because he was a good friend to many of those guys, but also many of the guys who are still playing, whether it's at Brewster Academy or anywhere else that his footprint touched. So Terrence Clark, like Emmy said, go look up his story. It's really a good one, but unfortunately, yeah. So our last one, I'm sorry we have to do this segment, but I just thought it'd be good to do. John Madden, just yesterday.
this is so hard, man. Oh my
god. Look, I love I'm a nerd for sports. Sports history in particular. I love football history. John Madden. Many of the casuals out there know him for being the guy, the namesake of possibly one of the greatest video games, or the greatest video game ever, in terms of revenue that it's generated, over $7 billion, that is, in the Madden games that come out every year. But John Madden was way more than that. If you don't know your history, he coached the Oakland Raiders for a decade. Took over in 1969, coached them through 1979 for exactly 10 years. He got them to 7 AFC championship games in 10 years. Only won one Super Bowl, but his 76% winning percentage over those 10 years still ranks as the best winning percentage in NFL history amongst all coaches that have reached the 100-win mark. Truly one of the great coaches, one of the great football minds of all time. After he retired at the early age of 42, being that he was fulfilled in his coaching career, he went on to be a great broadcaster, possibly the greatest broadcaster ever in any sport. He was the preeminent sports television analyst, particularly in football, but across all sports for over 30 years. He's the only man to call games for all four networks. That would all four major networks: CBS, Fox, ABC, and ESPN.
Or NBC.
So, NBC, that is. So he's the only guy to do that. He covered 11 Super Bowls. He won 16 Emmy Awards over those 30-some seasons. And I'm way too young. We're way too young to remember John Madden for a lot of, his career calling games. But I actually do have a memory of him calling a game, because the last game he ever called before he ultimately retired from broadcasting was Super Bowl 43 between the Cardinals and the Steelers.
Yeah.
So I encourage you, if you get the chance, a documentary was just actually released about John Madden on Christmas Day. I didn't watch it on Christmas Day. I recorded it and watched it before we came on tonight. I encourage you to watch that, because you'll gain a greater perspective for who he was. And there are many podcasts out there that you can listen to get a perspective for who John Madden was, because he is by many considered to be the king of football. He's the namesake of one of the greatest video games to ever be created. He helped create that video game that so many people still play today. He was a pioneer in the broadcasting industry. 16 Emmy Awards speaks for itself. And he still holds the best winning percentage for any coach that has reached 100 wins. And there are some great coaches to reach 100 wins.
Yeah.
So that's John Madden.
Yeah, and I mean, just what he did for the game of football. I mean, he changed how people watch football. I mean, obviously his love for offensive linemen and blocking. I mean, that goes without saying. I mean, he always is the first one to point out if someone makes a good block. He changed the casual fans' understanding of the game of football just as a whole. Like they're not just watching the ball now.
That's exactly right.
Exactly. Like you can you actually have an understanding of the X's and O's. And that, I feel like that goes like across the board with all fans now, and that's mostly because of him. And he made the turducken mainstream. That was, I mean, wow. I mean, what was it? It's a duck inside of a chicken inside of a turkey. I mean,
yep.
Wow.
Yep. He was, I don't know, this has probably already been written somewhere or said somewhere, but I was thinking about him today and reading about him today, and he's really 3 Hall of Famers in one person. That's probably been written somewhere, but I was thinking about today: coach, broadcaster, creator, and pioneer of one of the greatest video games to ever be created. Just really everything he touched that had to do with football was instantly a success. And he also played, I believe, but I think that's too far back to remember, and we could spend an entire podcast talking about the career of John Madden, but we're not going to do that. So 2021, pretty good year overall in sports. I would say some great moments, as we mentioned. We mentioned our favorite ones. We'll do that here going forward for every year that this podcast exists, which is hopefully for a
long time, hopefully.
for a long time. And to those who passed, rest in peace. That was a pretty tough segment.
I think it was a bit ambitious to do 6, but you live and you learn, and hopefully
we got through it.
If you're still listening now, well, thank you, because you that must have been hard. That must have been a tough listen.
But
I'll put in a timestamp so you can.
You have to do the tough things in life to be able to do the things that the good things or the fun things, which we're gonna do now.
Right. Put that on shirt.
We're gonna talk about well, first we're gonna get back into our NFL picks. We are to week 17 of the NFL season, and before this season, this would be the last week of the season.
Yep.
But Roger Goodell said, nope, this is not going to be the last week of the season. We're going to have an extra week. And, some or most of the players weren't too happy about that. But anyhow, week 17, 6 teams already in the playoffs. Oh, and by the way, I should mention, I'm going to for wild card weekend. So just putting that out there.
Well, let's hope Vegas makes the playoffs just for your sake.
That wild card weekend episode that we're going to do is going to be one of the more locked in episodes that I'm ever going to do on this podcast. But anyhow, 2 weeks left, 8 playoff spots still open, 6 teams already clinched. We should mention, and we'll go through some of the scenarios here. I have some of them pulled up as we go through the teams and the games, but 2 weeks left in the season. The Cowboys have won the NFC East, I believe. Is that correct?
Yep.
The Bucs won the NFC South. The Packers have won the NFC North. The Chiefs have won the AFC West. And then a couple other teams, the Cardinals and the Rams, have clinched spots in the playoffs. And then the other 8 spots are up for grabs. So let's get into our week 17 picks against the spread. Let me get the spreadsheet up real fast. Excuse me.
Yeah, you're good, man.
All right. The Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons at the Buffalo Bills.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, I apologize. The Atlanta Falcons at the Buffalo Bills, 14.5-point spread for the Bills at home. What do you think?
Well, it's good to be back. I'm going to take Buffalo. And that sounds crazy because I know it's a huge spread. It's a massive spread. I mean 8.5 is a massive spread. 14.5 is just, I don't even know what to compare it to. Elephantine? I don't know. Yeah, it's huge. But my reasoning is just simply the fact that whenever Atlanta plays a winning football team, they get destroyed. And that has taken place throughout the entire season, and that's held true the entire season. They've won. Give them credit. They've won the games that they should win. They've won the games against the bad teams or the mediocre teams. But against the good teams in this league, there's just simply too many holes on this roster. I just think Buffalo's pass rush is going to get home. And Atlanta's run game is not good enough to be able to take advantage of Buffalo's struggles defending the run these past few weeks. So I'm taking the Bills.
Yeah. Look, you mentioned it. The elephant.
I stole that from Chisel Adonis.
I apologize. I'm having a moment. But anyways, 14.5, it's large, but if you know anything about the Bills, they dominate inferior competition. They've struggled a little bit against some of the where they had a little mid-season lull where they struggled against some of the more level competition that you're going to see in the playoffs. When they
Good, dude.
when,
I mean, I expected the coughing, but not the laughing.
when they faced inferior opponents, they've really crushed them. Josh Allen is something. It's a rough episode. Something special. That's all I'll say. Buffalo minus 14.5. I don't care about the gargantuan spread. I think it's a good bet.
All right.
Anyways, let me gather
Moving
myself.
along. Yeah, we'll get through it, man. We're good. We got a lot of episode left in us. Moving along here to a even bigger spread. The Jaguars at the New England Patriots minus 15.5. Wow. Just wow. What are you thinking here?
Well, 15.5 is one of the biggest spreads I've seen this season. But given that what I know about Bill Belichick coming off two not so great losses, Mac Jones has hit a little bit of a wall, if you will, the past couple weeks. They've lost two not must-win games, but two important games. The Buffalo Bills now have the inside track to the division title, I believe, and can clinch a playoff berth with a win. And I believe a Ravens loss this weekend. I believe that's the scenario for the Bills. But I just think, given what I know, Bill Belichick's record against rookie quarterbacks is pretty damn good. I don't have the exact record, but you know what it is. It's been mentioned on this podcast before. I think Mac Jones will play well. And look, at this time of year, Colin Cowherd always says, you got to have one of three things. And if you have all three of these things, well, then, man, you're a great team. But if you have one of the three, you're going to be in the mix for not only a playoff berth, but maybe to win a playoff game. Those three things are a great coach, a great quarterback, and an identity. And I think New England checks two of the three boxes. They have an identity. We know what they are, a running football team, great defense, and they have a great coach in Bill Belichick. We know Mac Jones has had a really good season so far, but we don't really think of him as a great quarterback yet. We know he has a high floor, maybe a little bit lower of a ceiling as some of the things he can do athletically and off script. But I think they're going to get back to being who the Patriots are the past 20 years, and that's been a team that feasts on inferior opponents. And I know 14.5, 15.5, they're gargantuan spreads, but I just have a hard time betting a rookie quarterback on the road, even though it's Trevor Lawrence and he's had some good moments the past couple weeks. Betting on a rookie quarterback to even cover that spread on the road against Bill Belichick, I just can't do it.
Yeah, and I'll be quick. I'm gonna agree with you. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass since October, which really
It's rough.
puts things into perspective. I believe he's ran for a touchdown, but hasn't thrown for a touchdown since October, which is just unbelievable considering how good of a talent he is. But I don't expect him to be able to turn that around in Foxborough. I mean, a lot of rookies have gone into Foxborough. Not a lot of them have been able to come out with even a semblance of confidence.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So they're gonna win this weekend. They have I think if they win this weekend, they're in, but they have a bigger game next week against Miami, I believe. New England does. Miami's going to be playing for a playoff spot most likely. So, what a story that is. But anyways, we'll move on. One of the best games of the week on CBS: Kansas City Chiefs on their 8-game winning streak, coming off a absolute dominant performance against my Steelers on Sunday, -4.5 at the Cincinnati Bengals. I'll let you start with this one.
Well, yeah, I mean, this one's tough. I think this is the game of the week for sure. I mean, I'm really, really excited for this one. But just getting into the X's and O's. I think the biggest key for Cincinnati is going to be, can they get to Mahomes in terms of a pass rush? And I know we say that a lot with a lot of these quarterbacks, but it's the truth. I mean, you got to be able to get pressure. If you can't get pressure on these guys, then they're going to pick you apart. And I think with Trey Hendrickson and what's his name? Hubbard, I believe. I think they will be able to get pressure, at least enough to be respectable defensively. So I think ultimately it's going to be a really close game. I'm not saying the Bengals will win necessarily, but I do think they'll be within a field goal. So I'm going to take the Bengals to cover. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if they won this game, just simply because Joe Burrow is coming in on confidence. And I mean, I wouldn't put it past him because Joe Burrow and this offense is 100% capable. And to put it simply, I mean, I don't think the Chiefs have played an offense of this caliber on this run that they've been as a defense. I mean, you could say the Chargers, but I mean, they gave up, what was it, 28 points to the Chargers? So
yeah. I think I agree with you. And in our last episode, I was talking about the AFC North and how I didn't think there was one clear-cut team that could not only, be claimed to be the best team in the division, but also that could come out of this thing and win a playoff game even, just because of the inconsistency of, the Ravens, the Browns, the Steelers, and even the Bengals. We all knew that the Bengals were going to be a better football team than they were last year. I mean, it's hard to get worse than they were. And, they, of course, losing Joe Burrow didn't help. But we all still thought that even if they were going to be better, that this was still going to be sort of a rebuilding year for them. And, man, has it been anything but. Potentially double-digit wins, an AFC North title, worst to first, and possibly hosting a playoff game and maybe winning a playoff game. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them at this point. I know this really isn't the spot for hot takes because, we have a lot more to talk about that we need to get through, and we don't want this to be a 4-hour episode, and we don't want to go on tangents. And I really shouldn't be going on tangents with my condition right now, but look, right now, I'm not sure you can name 5, not even 10 quarterbacks that are playing better football than Joe Burrow. And guess what? I don't think he's top 10 yet, but I think by some point next season, Joe Burrow will be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I think he's that good. Some of the plays that he made on Sunday, and I know he's just absolutely torched the Ravens. I mean, it's like Patrick Mahomes against the Raiders this year, right? I mean, some teams you just show up against, I guess. But like Luka Doncic against the Spurs. But anywho, what some of the plays he's made, like escaping sacks, getting out of the pocket, making throws downfield, it just really shows that. Look, I wouldn't put it past him being the best quarterback in the division already, and I think he's going to be a top 10, bona fide top 10 quarterback by at some point next season. I don't think he's there yet because there's still some inconsistency. He's still behind a rebuilding offensive line, still figuring some things out, but he's really playing at a high level right now. And I wouldn't put it past the Bengals with their pass rush to come out and win this game, but I think it's going to be tough. I do think the Chiefs will probably win just because some of the inexperience that the Bengals have and with how well the Chiefs are playing. But look, 4.5 is a big spread on the road, and home underdogs, have been really, really a successful bet this season. So take the Bengals plus the points. It's the smart play, but the winner of this game, I think, will be decided on the last couple of drives. I just think it's going to be that great of a game.
Yeah, and before we move on, I just want to say, I'd argue that he's already top 10. I mean, I that sounds crazy, but I mean, the last step for him is the consistency. But when he's there, he is. I mean, when he's on it, I mean, he's borderline elite. I mean, the only thing that may hold him back is the arm strength, but I mean, even that hasn't really been an issue at all with a lot of these games. It's just the fact that he has a confident processor. That's the only reason why he makes the mistakes he does. But like we said, tangents aren't really what we need to do right now because this is going to be a long episode to begin with. So moving along. Okay, next game is Rams at Ravens. Rams favored -3.5. Yeah, I'll start with this one. I've been really disappointed with Matthew Stafford lately. I know the Rams have gotten back to winning, but I mean, just when we thought Stafford was going to get back to being himself, he just went right back to short arming throws. I mean, a ton of turnover worthy plays. I mean, he almost gave away the game a few times over these past few weeks, multiple times. So just really weird play from him. But I in the end, I don't think it will matter. The Ravens are just too battered and bruised up. I don't know who will be playing quarterback for the Ravens, but I don't think it will matter. The Rams defense is a force to be reckoned with. So I think the Rams will win relatively comfortably, and this should be a get right game for Matt Stafford, but we'll see. You there?
I apologize. I was muted. But it's been a rough go for the Baltimore Ravens. Not only the past couple of weeks, but this season overall. The injuries, the COVID, everything has hit them hard. They're all like their fourth or fifth string quarterbacks, which isn't going to bode well against Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson and Tyler Higbee. I think they're going to have what's his name, Cam Akers, return for at least the playoffs, just to have him, whatever he may be, coming off that Achilles injury, that running game, Sean McVay as your play caller. I think it's going to be too much. I think not only is Baltimore physically battered and bruised, but I think they're emotionally battered and bruised. So I think it's just too much for Baltimore this year. Their defense, their secondary is one of the worst I've ever seen. And I've seen some bad secondaries in my time watching football. And but it's because of injuries. They have a legitimate excuse for being this bad. And look, I think Lamar Jackson is going to play this weekend, but as you said, I don't think it's going to matter. This Rams defense is playing really good football right now. They're forcing turnovers. Aaron Donald has really, just when you think one of these other guys, is being talked about for Defensive Player of the Year, he's really shown himself the past couple of weeks. I don't think that's a mistake. So he's reminded everyone basically, hey, I'm still here. I'm still Aaron Donald. I don't think we ever forgot that, but Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett are getting a lot of the pub for this award, and no one's mentioning Aaron Donald, but that's beside the point. 3.5 Rams are the better football team. It's just that simple. Regardless of what you think about Matt Stafford, he still gives you the wow moments in every single game.
Right.
Look, for the Rams, do they have an identity? I'd say probably. Do they have a great coach? I'd say, yeah. Great quarterback. They have a really good quarterback. I'm not sure you'd say great.
Yeah.
But the way they're playing right now, they're going to be an really interesting team to watch come the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. Moving along, Raiders at Indianapolis. A really interesting game, but a little bit disappointing since Carson Wentz will be in the COVID protocol. He tested positive for the virus, and he is unvaccinated, so who knows when he'll be able to return. But it will probably be in a couple weeks. But still, nevertheless, I believe Jacob Eason will be starting, and that changes things a bit. Definitely. I think in this scenario, I think the Raiders do have the upper hand. The Raiders secondary has been, it's been an up and down year, but I think overall, if you look at their entire body of work, it's been solid, especially when Trayvon Merrick is in the lineup. And the offense, they've kind of stabilized themselves a little bit. They've gotten the running game back going again. And it hasn't been quite as explosive as it was at the beginning of the year, but I could still say pretty definitively that they have exceeded expectations from the start of the year as an offense and as a team as a whole. So I feel pretty confident saying the Raiders will cover and maybe win this game as well.
I agree with you. Not going to be too long on this one. As of yesterday, the players on the COVID list for the Colts that either have COVID or just on the COVID list for whatever other reason. Quentin Nelson, who was actually just activated today, so they don't have to worry about not having him on Sunday, but their right guard, their right tackle, their best defensive player, Darius Leonard, both their safeties, Kari Willis and Jahlil Adai, 2 cornerbacks, wide receiver Zach Pascal, defensive end Kamoko Toure, defensive lineman Malik Jefferson, running back Marlon Mack, and tight end Farrod Green. All on the COVID list for the Indianapolis Colts. That is a lot to overcome. I know Frank Reich is a really good coach. I know it will either be Jacob Eason or Sam Ellinger at the helm here for this game. But I ultimately think, given that the Raiders are still very much alive in this playoff race, in this wild card race, and it could work out pretty favorably for them, given some of the tiebreakers that they have if they were able to win these last two games, that they're going to be playing with their hair on fire, and they're going to ultimately not only cover the spread, but I think they're going to win this game outright, just given the circumstances that the Colts are in right now. Still think the Colts are a really good team, but and a dangerous team come playoff time, given that they're healthy. But I just think it's too much to overcome, given everybody. I mean, right tackle, starting middle linebacker, both your safeties, your quarterback, one of your running backs. It's just going to be too much for them to overcome, even playing at home against still a really good offense in Derek Carr and the Raiders. So take the Raiders plus 7.5.
Yeah. All right. But before we move on to the next game, I'm going to pause the recording just because I'm going to run to the bathroom real quick. When we come back, we'll continue, but I'll be right back. All right, I am back. We are back. We'll continue with our picks, and it's Dolphins at Titans. What are you thinking?
Well, this is quite the interesting one that I didn't think was going to be so interesting at the beginning of November when the Miami Dolphins were, 1-7, more dysfunctional than the Jacksonville Jaguars, arguably. They looked bad. 99% of America had written them off, including us. And since, the trade deadline passed, coincidentally, I think not, that they're 6-0 since the trade deadline happened.
7-0.
Yeah.
Or since the trade deadline, yeah. I see what you mean.
Yeah, undefeated since the trade deadline. We all know that before the trade deadline, the story in Miami was not the play on the field. It was actually what was going to happen with Tua Tagovailoa, their starting quarterback, and the rumors of the Dolphins possibly moving off him and going after a Deshaun Watson or another star quarterback. But of course, the situation around Deshaun Watson prevented that from happening. And ever since the trade deadline passed, and ever since all that talk stopped, Tua has been playing really well, and the Dolphins are playing really well. And just like I thought at the beginning of the season, I thought I actually picked them to be a little bit better than the Patriots are, and I don't think they're that, but they've gotten themselves into a pretty incredible position considering where they were just about 2 months ago. From 1-7 to 8-7, they're actually the first team in NFL history to lose 7 straight games and then win 7 straight games immediately after that. So there you go. But one caveat here, given the improbable run and everything, the Dolphins are one of the worst cold weather teams in recent NFL history. And they're going to be playing in pretty cold weather here in Tennessee on Sunday. 38 degrees expected at kickoff. Since 2017, the Miami Dolphins are 1-11 in games where the kickoff temperature is below 50 degrees. All 11 of those losses have come by an average of 17 points per game. So historically, they do not fare well in this particular situation that they're going to be in Tennessee on Sunday. What is the line? The line is Tennessee -3.5 at home. They've had a couple extra days given that they played on Thursday night and the Dolphins played on Monday night. I think the Dolphins can still sneak in potentially even if they lose this game. So, and the Titans can lock up the AFC South with a win. I'm going to take the Titans -3.5, even though I know that it's risky given that the Titans offense is hit or miss, drive to drive. But I think I'm going to take the Titans given what I know at this particular moment in time.
Yeah. I think we've agreed on every single game so far. But I mean, I feel like I have to agree with you here. I mean, the Dolphins, I know that they're on a 7-game win streak, but at the same time, I have to be a little bit skeptical because really, if you look at the quality of opponents they've been facing, it hasn't been very good. I mean, the Ravens is really the outlier in that, but even with them, they've been very inconsistent this season. So they haven't had to beat any of the elite teams on this run. And I mean, I'm not saying the Titans are elite, but they're certainly a class above all the teams that they've had to beat on this 7-game win streak. So I'm going to pick the Titans to cover. And I think it will be a close game. I don't think it'll be a formality. I think it'll be a very low-scoring game, defensive-oriented game. But ultimately, I just think with the Miami run game being not very good, that's going to really hinder them in this game. So I will take the Tennessee Titans to cover. So moving on, New York Giants at Chicago Bears. Bears favored -5.5. I'll go super quick here. I don't really much care about this game too much. I'm going to pick the Giants to cover, kind of in spite of myself, but I don't have any confidence that the Bears will be able to just pull away against this Giants defense, especially. I don't think their performance against Seattle fixes all of their problems. It definitely doesn't. And I think it'll be more of the same type of offense that we saw against Minnesota. So because of that, I'm going to pick the Giants. I know the Giants are in a really bad place right now as a football team, but offensively, I just don't have that much faith in the Bears unless Nick Foles goes into Super Bowl, whatever that was, mode. Then I really don't have much confidence.
I agree with you. I've said on this podcast before, I think Joe Judge is a really good football coach. He's going to have his guys motivated in some way, shape, or form. And look, I decimated the Bears last week on the podcast. And look, it was a nice win against one of the worst Seattle teams that we've seen this decade. Actually, the worst Seattle team we've seen this decade. So, congratulations. You barely beat Seattle in the snow, a pretty bad football team at this particular juncture. And the Giants, regardless of what you think about them, I still think they're pretty well coached, and I think their defense can do enough to keep them in this game. So there you go. That's my analysis.
All righty, moving along. Philadelphia Eagles favored -3.5 at the Washington football team. Oh man, my camera. Yeah. Okay. So, This is going to be my lock of the week.
Okay.
I'm going to be taking the Eagles here. And it's really just, I mean, it's not that complicated. I don't think much of this Washington team right now. I mean, I know Ron Rivera is a really good coach and that he's going to want to show some fight in this team, but I think Philadelphia at this particular moment is clearly the better football team. Washington has a lot to figure out just in terms of just like that drama that was going on the sideline, let alone what was going on the field. So I'm going to take the Eagles, and I think they'll be able to run the football.
You know, with the Eagles, going back to what I was saying earlier about the three things you have to have and what Colin Cowherd says all the time, the guy I respect, not necessarily agree with everything he says, but certainly respect him. The Eagles, we certainly don't think they have a great coach, although give credit to Nick Sirianni where credit is due. He's really gotten this team to overachieve this year, in my opinion, and put them in a good position to snag a wild card spot here in these last couple of weeks if they can win these next two games. But also, we don't think of Jalen Hurts as a great quarterback, much less a good quarterback. But he's played really well for what he is, and so they already don't have two of the things that you have to have. But what they do have, and what you cannot argue that they don't have, is an identity. They have a bona fide identity, and that is being physical in the trenches and running the football and letting Jalen Hurts make plays off script with his legs. And I think that's really served them well. They have young receivers that I really like, young skill position players that I really like. And we have always liked the Eagles in the trenches. I mean, the defensive line, the offensive line, when they've been able to stay healthy. So I think I don't know what that was on Sunday night against the Cowboys, that sideline scuffle between Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, the two defensive linemen from Alabama, where Jonathan Allen basically threw a right-hand hook at Daron Payne or whatever. Maybe it was the other way around, but look, that just doesn't happen on any given NFL sideline at any given time, especially a coach that we respect and run under a coach that we respect and Ron Rivera. I mean, he might not have the greatest teams at times, but we never thought he may, lose a locker room. And I think we say the Giants are in a bad spot right now as a team, but I think Washington, you can say the same thing, given what I saw on the sideline in Dallas on Sunday night. So I don't know, maybe that was just frustrations boiling over from the past couple of weeks in this losing streak, and maybe the organization's not such in a bad spot, but just from an outsider's perspective, it's not looking good. Just some of the body language in general from even Taylor Heineke at points in times has been really, really something concerning if you're a Washington football team fan. But I think the Eagles, they're in position to go get a wild card spot. I think that's what they're going to do. I really do. It's unbelievable, but I think given their identity and the physical fashion in which they play football and the role that they've been on through the past couple of weeks, I think they're set up well. And they can play in cold weather, given that they know how to be physical and run the football. So I don't really worry about that too much either. It's just whether or not Jalen Hurts can be effective and not, make those mistakes. And I think they're set up well. look, I mean, did anyone think Nick Sirianni would be in this position? I certainly didn't. And I don't think a lot of people did. But if he gets this team to the playoffs, I think they have a chance to win 10 games. I don't know who they play next week. But if he
They
wins
play the Cowboys.
okay, well. I mean, even if he wins 9 games, has a winning record, and gets this team to the playoffs, he has to be in conversation for Coach of the Year. I don't care what anyone says.
All right, definitely.
So give credit where credit is due. I was one of the biggest doubters of Philadelphia coming into the season, and have they proven me wrong. So
Yeah,
I think I picked them last in the division, if I remember correctly. That was a mistake, but go ahead.
what do you think about the case for Jalen Hurts as the guy for the future of the Eagles? Like, do you think he's been able to do enough?
It's hard to say right now. I'd like to see one more season. He's played well. I think he has. I mean, as of last week, it was 24 touchdowns, over 3,000 yards passing, only 10 interceptions, if I'm not mistaken. He's played well. He's put this team in a good position. He's winning games, playing well. I still need to see more. I think it's that third year where you really make a determination. And this is his first actual full season being the starter. I don't think you can make a declaration at this point. Give me one more season under this head coach, see what they can do. And we'll go from there. But do I think he could eventually be the guy? Maybe. I don't think it. I mean, 4 months ago, I would have said hell no. But at this point, I would say there's a possibility. I think so. Given what he's shown, for sure.
Yeah,
So,
and I think at the very least, he's earned the right to have a chance at another season, for sure.
Absolutely. And one thing that we get from Jalen Hurts that I think personifies the city of Philadelphia, but this Philadelphia Eagles team in general, is that toughness that he showed at Alabama and that he showed now in the NFL. So I think it's pretty fitting that he is their quarterback at this point in time. So moving on, go quick with this one. Buccaneers, 13.5-point favorites at the New York Jets.
I'm going to take the Bucs. Pretty simple here. I'm taking a lot of the big underdogs, or a lot of the big favorites today. Sorry. But really, it's just I think the teams that are the best in the league are going in the right direction, and the teams that are the worst in the league are looking to get their draft pick, and they've kind of moving along. So with the Jets being in this like developmental stage, they're playing all the young pieces. I just don't think they match up at all. So I'm taking the Bucs.
I think you put it perfectly. At this stage late in the season, teams like the Jets looking to position themselves well in the draft as well as they can at this point. And of course, well, actually the Jets have that Seattle pick, which I think is going to be another high pick. So they're set up well this upcoming draft. But look, the Buccaneers, they're still going for that 1 seed. We know they've clinched their division, but they're still going for that top spot in the NFC. So they need to win this game, and I think they're going to do it in dominant fashion, given that they're just a better, way better football team. But I will say this. I have been impressed. I wasn't the biggest Zach Wilson guy back when we were doing our draft stuff, but I have been impressed by some of the stuff I've seen from Zach Wilson since he's returned from injury. I won't go on a huge tangent, but I'll just say that We can get into it another day, but I'm very impressed with
Yeah.
some of the things I've seen from Zach Wilson. Got to give him credit.
This draft class will be really intriguing going into the future because I don't think we'll truly know if any of these guys are NFL quarterbacks until maybe year 3 or 4. That's how this is looking. So moving along, Denver Broncos at the Los Angeles Chargers. Oh, man.
Oh, boy.
Just when I thought the Chargers were ready to hit their stride and, gallop their way into the playoffs, they stumble just as many past Chargers teams have. And against the Texans, no less. Just unbelievable. I mean, I don't even know what to think of them now because if they're going to give up that much on the ground, then it's going to be hard to win against anybody. But I will give them a benefit of the doubt because they did have a lot of players in the COVID protocols, particularly Joey Bosa, who is a huge part of that defensive line. And that really showed. They were really just punked by that Texans team, which is crazy to say, but it's just the truth. So with getting some of those guys back, I think they'll win this game, and I think they'll win it pretty comfortably, like about maybe a touchdown. So I think they will cover the spread, that 5.5 point spread.
I agree with you. I think the Broncos are now in a really tough spot. Look, the offense wasn't necessarily explosive with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, but it's gotten even worse with Drew Lock at quarterback. They run the football pretty well, and that's sort of a concern for the Chargers, but that's the way it's been all season. The Chargers have gotten themselves to this point in a position to still in a great position to make the playoffs. Look, the Bills had a stinker against the Jaguars. The Titans had a stinker against both the Jets and the Texans. Look, this happens to everybody. I know it's hard to unsee because this is what we've seen from Chargers teams of past years, and this has been their bugaboo, if you will. But look, I think Justin Herbert, he's going to bounce back. I think this is really a tune-up game. Get back to what you do well. I do not believe they had Austin Eckler at their disposal in that game, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And that didn't help Justin Herbert at all. So I think he'll bounce back, and I think they'll win this game at home and get themselves a playoff spot. So no further analysis needed. I'll start with this one. Houston at San Francisco, minus 12.5. The big news this week in the NFL. Jimmy Garoppolo hurt once again. Thumb, tendon, I don't know the exact injury. It's a UCL. Something going on with his thumb on his throwing hand that's probably going to prevent him from playing. We're going to get to see Trey Lance, most likely, in this game. We all know San Francisco, even with Trey Lance, still has the far better roster. But we've been picking the big favorites. But I think I'm going to pick, given what I've seen from Davis Mills and this Texans team, and some of the things that I've seen, I think I'm going to take Houston to cover the spread in this game. I do worry about it a little bit. Rebuilding team. They just played the game of their lives last week at home against the Chargers. Got some breaks in that game. But I think given the quarterback situation in San Francisco right now, I think 12.5 is a little bit big. for the 49ers against the feisty Houston team. I mean, they beat the Chargers, say what you want, but they beat the Chargers, they beat the Titans. I mean, and they've been competitive in some of these games, more competitive than you think at least. I think they'll be able to keep it relatively close. So I'm going to take the Texans plus 12.5. I still think Trey Lance will play. Who knows? I think he'll play well. But I think the 49ers will win because they have to. And of course, the Texans are a good draft pick. But I think the Texans will hang tough.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And with it being Trey Lance versus Davis Mills, I would argue that the quarterback matchup is not very lopsided. I mean, with Davis Mills being having those games under his belt and a little bit of confidence, there's not much of a difference there. And I think Davis Mills is a guy who, I mean, he was a 5-star recruit going into college, and if he stayed at Stanford, I think he might have had a shot at being a first or second round pick. He definitely has the talent. Yeah, I don't think the quarterback matchup is so one-sided that it really warrants this 12.5 point spread. But I do think this 49ers defense will be able to get after the quarterback better than that Chargers team did with Nick Bosa and D Ford, or not D Ford. Yeah. Wait, do they still have D Ford? Yeah, they have D Ford. Sorry. That is just, oh my goodness. I am so rusty this podcast. I apologize, guys. But yeah, I'm taking the Texans to cover. That's the point.
All right. Another game of the week. Cardinals slumping here as of late at the Dallas Cowboys. -5.5. You start. It's your team.
Man, I've been so pessimistic about my team the entire season, really. I mean, we were 7 or 8 games in, and the Cowboys were undefeated against the spread, and I was still picking against them. And that should tell you a lot. But this last week, as a Cowboys fan, it felt really good just to be able to watch my team put a beating on a division rival and just have everything come together, especially 3 weeks before the playoffs. Whether we'll be able to replicate that again, I don't know, but it's looking really good right now. I'm going to take my Cowboys. Covering is going to be tough. Even with the Cardinal struggles, I still think they're a good team and they're going to be competitive. And I don't know how much I can trust the interior of our defensive line to help maintain the containment of Kyler Murray. But I just think overall, the pass rush, the secondary, it's clicking on all cylinders. I think we'll be able to force a turnover to get us over that 5.5 point hump. So I will be picking my Cowboys to cover.
There's an interesting trend that surfaced with Cliff Kingsbury's Cardinals since he's taken over as head coach a couple of years ago. Weeks 1 through 7, the Cardinals under Cliff Kingsbury, 15-5.
Wow.
After that, week 7 and beyond, or I guess week 8 and beyond, 8-18. The Chiefs, we look at the Chiefs, say what you want. We all know Andy Reid to be this great September coach, but in their last 22 November and December games, when it really matters, they're 22-0. this is the time of year where everything needs to come together, not when everything needs to fall apart.
Right.
I'm sorry to say. And look, you said it. It seems that not only did things come together for Dallas on Sunday night, but this game is being played in the comfort of Jerry World, where Dak Prescott is a totally different quarterback, or at least has been at home than he has been on the road. And that's why I think the home field advantage and getting at least the number 2 seed and having not only one, but maybe 2 home playoff games would be really beneficial for the Cowboys. We already know they're going to have at least 1, but getting at least 2 and maybe even 3 would be absolutely fantastic for the Cowboys. I think at this particular juncture, they have the better offense. I think they have the better defense. And say what you want about Mike McCarthy, but they have the more experienced and I think better coach. Maybe not more clever coach. You can give that to Cliff Kingsbury, but I think they have the better coach. So they check all the boxes right now. I think they're legitimate Super Bowl contenders. I put them in my 6 or 7, maybe 8 teams that could go win the Super Bowl if it started today. Dallas has been really impressive at home, and we've seen some iffy performances on the road, but forget all that. They have playmakers at every level, and I just think it's going to be too much for Arizona.
Right. Exactly. And I saw a really cool stat. Yeah, I'm sure you'll appreciate this one. The Cowboys are the first defense in NFL history to have a player with 11 sacks and 11 interceptions on the same team.
Wow.
Yeah. Pretty crazy.
I mean, at this particular juncture, and I know there are so many great. We talk about offense all the time, but think about all the great defensive players that we have in this league as well.
Right.
TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Aaron Donald. I mean, we talk about all these names, but Micah Parsons, holy shit, man. He's something else. I mean, there were a lot of questions about not his talent. We knew he had the talent coming out of Penn State. But when we were doing our draft stuff, there were stories written about, his work ethic and some of the off the field stuff that maybe could have been problematic given where he was going and the situation he was going into with Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys and the spotlight and all that stuff. But man, I saw a stat. I don't remember what it was, but I think he's like the only player in NFL history to have like over 70 tackles and 13 and a half sacks in a season. It was something along those lines. Only player in NFL history to do that. Yeah. So, look, I don't know what's going to happen with TJ Watt over these last 2 weeks or Myles Garrett, but right now, the way it's looking, I don't think Myles Garrett's going to be in the playoffs. I don't think TJ Watt's going to be in the playoffs. Aaron Donald might, but he's not really having that type of season. I think at this point in time, he's got to be the favorite, odds-on favorite for Defensive Player of the Year. And that's really saying something, given that I'm really biased towards TJ Watt. But we'll save that for another day.
Yeah. All right.
Unless TJ Watt breaks the single season sack record. Right. But he has to get 5 sacks over the last 2 games to do that. So I don't think that's very likely, given that he's dealing with broken ribs at this particular junction. But anywho, moving on. Our next game, holy shit, I I wrote Dak Prescott -5.5 on our spreadsheet. Man, that just sums up the podcast. All right.
Yep.
Carolina Panthers at the New Orleans Saints -7.5. What do you think?
I'm taking the Panthers. I don't have any faith in Ian Book as a quarterback in this league. As bad as that sounds, even with New Orleans defense being as good as it is, I just don't. If you're not able to score, it's just hard to win the NFL. It's as simple as that. And I think with Sam Darnold back in the lineup, hopefully they start him. I don't know why they would start Cam Newton. I mean, the whole nostalgia thing has weared off at this point. Just start Sam Darnold. So if they start Sam Darnold, I'll feel pretty good about the Panthers covering here. So I'm just gonna say that they will and pick the Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think Ian Book is going to be a starting quarterback in this league anytime soon or ever will be, but I don't think it's fair to really jump on him for that performance.
Right. Yeah,
performance.
I agree with that as well. That I didn't say that to just like put an indictment on his NFL career. Like, I don't think in this particular game,
right. I get what you're saying, but I'm just letting the people know, put things in perspective, that it's not fair to jump on him. You know, he was on short notice. He had to, against a really good defense, a really good defensive coach in Brian Flores. It wasn't easy. But all things aside, the Panthers are struggling. They're eliminated from the playoffs. But, what better to play spoiler? What better than to play spoiler to their division rivals' playoff hopes? They are starting Sam Darnold. I believe that has been announced, if I'm not mistaken. And I just think whether they win this game or not, they're going to try to, at all costs, to try and spoil the playoff hopes of the New Orleans Saints. And look, I think they can do it. Matt Rule's taking a lot of heat right now. I think undeservedly so. I still think he's building something good there in Carolina with some of the players that he's been able to draft over the past couple of years. But that's beside the point. That's off-season conversation. I think you're right. I think take the Panthers to cover and don't be surprised if they win. Although, during Sean Payton's tenure, it's not often you see them lose two straight games at the Superdome. But that's beside the point. So the next game, we're coming down the stretch here. A game that really doesn't matter. The Detroit Lions at the Seattle Seahawks -6.5. I'm sorry, I'm sticking with what I've been doing all season. I'm picking the Lions +6.5 to cover the spread. That's all I'll say. Whether it's Mr. Blau or Jared Goff, I don't care. Take the Lions.
Right. Tim Boyle.
Yeah,
Blau or anybody. I mean, all of them, man. Honestly, give me the Lions. I am a huge Dan Campbell fan.
I am too.
I think honestly, most of the football world is a Dan Campbell fan. He's just very likable what he's been able to do with the Lions this year, and if they were to win this game, I wouldn't be too surprised given how they've been playing the past.
And let me just say something about the Lions real quick. I know it's been rough for the Lions. It's going to continue to be that way. They still have a long way to go in their rebuild. But look, I mean, guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, I mean, man, he's got to be one of the surprise players of this year. That guy can play. They have a I don't know if he's a number one receiver, but they definitely have themselves a guy that can stick around on that team for a long time to come. And some of the guys they have on that offensive line, they have a couple of young guys on that defense. Of course, Swift, who's been out the past couple of weeks with injury, but they have as a Lions fan, you can see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, at least.
Right.
At least
Exactly.
with this past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So just be happy for that if you're a Lions fan. And that you're probably going to end up getting the number 1 or number 2 overall draft pick.
Right.
So who knows? Seattle might win the game because it's Russell Wilson and they need to win, because I don't think they're in a really good, that locker room isn't in a very good spot right now. But given that the Lions won a good draft pick, they might want to lose, but who knows? We'll see.
Yeah.
All right, prime time. Divisional matchup. Vikings still have playoff hopes. Packers have already locked up the division. -6.5. What do you think for the Packers at Lambeau?
Man, if this were in Minnesota, I would feel really good about picking Minnesota to cover. And if it were early in the season, I would feel pretty good about picking Minnesota to cover. But given the fact that this season, or just the last couple of weeks, the way that they've gone, even with the win against the Bears, it was kind of a lull you to sleep kind of win. It was like, we won, but like, did we though? Like that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
I just don't feel that confident in the Vikings right now. And I think the Packers will take care of business. I'm gonna take the Packers.
I like to agree with you, but I think, and I might talk myself into it, but I have slightest bit of concern with this Green Bay team, given that
I do too.
they're bottom 3 against the run, I think, at this point, in terms of yards per carry given up. And, a stat that Vegas loves to look at when they make these lines and when they evaluate the teams is point differential. And Green Bay is middle of the pack in point differential at +59. And 43 of those points came with blowout wins, over the Bears and the Lions. So really, they've been in close games all year, when it hasn't been the, Bears and Lions in their division, 2 dysfunctional franchises that Aaron Rodgers historically dominates. So I have some concern. I mean, they were at home, primetime, Christmas Day. Aaron Rodgers played great, as he always does, but I mean, Baker Mayfield threw 4 interceptions, played one of the worst games I've ever seen a quarterback play. And yet Cleveland, if it weren't for a missed holding call on that last interception, probably wins that game.
Right.
And I think they controlled the line of scrimmage for a lot of that game, and they were missing two of their Pro Bowl starters on that offensive line. So I still think Green Bay is really good. Do I think they win out and get that home field advantage 1 seed in the NFC playoffs? Probably. But is that to say that I don't think a talented team like Minnesota can keep this game close, given that's what we've seen all season with Green Bay outside of the games against the Lions and Bears? I don't think it's – I mean, Tyler Huntley put up 400 yards of offense on the – and I know they have Jair Alexander coming back, but – and that should help. But I think – Look, Aaron Rodgers will probably say shut the fuck up and prove me wrong, but I'm going to take the Vikings plus 6.5. I believe Dalvin Cook was activated once again. He's going to be playing this game, or at least he's going to start the game. Who knows if he'll finish it? But that's beside the point. So that's
I can definitely see that happening for sure, given that, Minnesota has played in close games all year also. I mean, they find a way to make every game close no matter what. It's a little bit absurd, but yeah. Moving along. Last game, Monday Night Football. Cleveland Browns at Pittsburgh Steelers. Browns favored -2.5. Man, oh man. Could this be – wait, are y'all playing at home next week? Do you know?
no.
Okay, so Ben's last home game possibly?
There's definitely a good chance. Look. I mean, what the fuck? Excuse my language, but it seems just like the Cowboys, the Steelers are like they're 5-0-1 in their past 6 home games. So they're winning games at home, and they've beaten good teams at home. I mean, they beat the Ravens back when they were a somewhat good team. They beat the Titans, they beat the Browns. They beat the Bills on the road, but that was week 1 where chaos happens every year. The defense, it hasn't been the same. The offense is just frankly one of the worst offenses I've ever seen in my time watching the NFL. The offensive line it's had its moments, but it's not what you want. And I feel bad for Ben, the criticism that he's, and some of it is fair. It is. Some of the throws that he makes in game, I mean, it's concerning, but at the same time, if you watch the Steelers and the play calling and the offensive line, I do think some of the harsh beatings that he's taken from the media is not necessarily fair at this particular juncture, given that this is likely the last 2 games of his career. A career that, 2 Super Bowl championships, first ballot Hall of Fame solidified, 5th all time in passing yards. We can go on and on. Holds virtually every Steelers record that was before held by Terry Bradshaw. Look, I just don't think it's fair. Now, given what I know about Pittsburgh and the trend that the trend that's been happening, they get blown out on the road against the Bengals. Then they come back and beat the Ravens. Then they get blown out on the road against the Vikings, and they come back and beat the Titans. Then they get blown out on the road against the Chiefs, and they come back home and will they beat the Browns? I don't know. Ben has owned the Browns in his career. Does he make an exclamation point or not? Does he finish it off or not? I have to pick the Steelers because they're at home and the emotion it's going to be palpable. I think the trend It's been going for weeks now. They're just a different team at home than they are on the road. Getting Devin Bush back this week from COVID. Say what you want about that. And I just can't unsee what I've seen from Baker Mayfield the past couple of weeks. Now, if Cleveland runs the football, if they're smart and they actually just run the football the entire game, well, I'm going to be wrong on this one. But take the Steelers just out of plain fandom, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take the Steelers also. I mean, a lot of that last week, I feel like anybody could see it coming. I mean, it wasn't a good matchup to begin with. I mean, obviously you would have hoped to have kept it closer, but I think the thing that made that game so bizarre was just some of the play calling. I mean, all that fake reverse or whatever that was that ended up in the fumble. I mean, what the heck was that? I mean, watching that play back on replay is just like, Ben can barely move and you're doing that. Like, wow. Like, wow. And then, I mean, the flea flicker when you're struggling to run the football, that's a little bit questionable. I mean, things like that. I mean, that's what kind of makes me a little bit apprehensive when it comes to this game. But even with that, I'm going to pick the Steelers. I just think the Browns, I mean, they are who they are. I mean, this AFC North have been cannibalizing each other the whole season. And I think it's just fitting that an AFC North team will take on the other when it comes to their chances at the playoffs, just ruin their chances and then cannibalize each other. Like I said.
A couple things I'll say. I get what you're saying about the play calling. I'll be the first to come on here and do a whole rant about the play calling. It's been absolutely atrocious. But I will say that the flea flicker was actually, I think, a good call. They had Ray McLeod open. Ben just threw a bad throw. The wind was, I think it was 30-mile-per-hour gusts, and I guess it just sailed on him. They had Ray McLeod open. If he had thrown a good ball, they likely would have completed it. But I get what you're saying. I mean, I mean, at this point, I get it. You're trying to get whatever you can going any way, any shape, anyhow.
Right.
But otherwise, the play calling was just absolutely atrocious. The second thing I will say, I've been harsh on Chase Claypool, but give him credit. He made catches in that game that, that's why we have him on the field.
Right.
And he showed some maturity. He was catching the ball, setting the ball down, giving the ball to the refs. Just give him a little credit. If you're going to criticize someone, you have to give them credit as well. So give him credit. And then also, something I didn't mention is Mike Tomlin and Ben Roethlisberger together have won 19 consecutive home Monday Night Football games. And that's exactly what this is. And it's likely the last one. So just putting that out there. But I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast, episode 86. We've decided we're going to record the college football playoff preview and maybe talk about some other bowl matchups as well tomorrow, sometime during the day, and that will be released sometime this weekend as well, along with this episode. But since it's 1:45 in the morning and we've been doing this for probably 2 hours plus now, we're going to wrap it up right here. So, Emmy, do you have anything you want to say? And then I'll close this out.
No, yeah, I just think the carnage that will play out in the AFC is going to be insane.
Oh wait, I forgot. I need to make my lock of the week.
Ooh, yeah, that's right.
So yours was the Eagles, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Jesus, what a podcast. Is this a first time underdog lock?
yeah.
I don't know. Actually, okay. I'm between Bengals plus 4.5 at home against the Chiefs or Titans minus 3.5 over the Dolphins. But I think I'm gonna take the Bengals plus 4.5. So they can still lose and I can still win the lock.
I like that take actually.
Bold,
But I like it.
Yeah, it is bold given what I've seen from the Chiefs. But anywho, that's gonna wrap it up for this episode of the Raw CrossFit Podcast. Hope you enjoyed all of it. As Emmy said earlier, he's gonna put timestamps on this. It was a very long episode, given what we did at the beginning. But we got through it. We'll be doing our college football episode tomorrow. All of this will be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I encourage you to maybe don't watch the YouTube, or maybe maybe for your entertainment, do watch the YouTube version because it had a little bit of everything.
Yep.
Me laughing hysterically.
The camera falling. I mean, everything.
But it also had, me coughing, me laughing so hard that I was almost crying, and of course the occasional coughs. So, yeah. What did Jim Valvano say in his famous SB speech? I don't have the exact quote, but
Okay, just try, man.
just fuck it. Just like the I don't mean to be harsh or anything, but just like the many great, actually I won't do that. Just like
Ben Roethlisberger's career.
we are gone.
All right. Peace out, yo.